First post. Hopefully things are formatted right as I am posting from my phone. So, I used to be a CNA at a hospital in Missouri. Our general job is to take vitals at specified times, document input/output, and then just help the patients with whatever they need. But occasionally, we have to be a, let's just say, babysitter for someone, which usually means this person is being crazy or on suicide watch and needs to have someone with them at all times. Being a youngish and relatively average-looking female, I had my fair share of creepy/weird hospital patient stories. I've been bitten, kicked, groped, etc., but this particular story is probably the moment that actually made me realize that people can be terrifying creatures and all that. More background. The hospital I worked at was hit by a tornado in May of 2011, and sometime after, our behavioral health facility was relocated to a much more seduced area, very close to the border of Missouri and Kansas, through only a few miles from town. I'm talking, you could see all the stars outside and hear the coyotes in the distance. It seriously felt like the scene of a potential horror movie during my smoke breaks outside there. I worked overnight, and though I usually work cardiac, I was called over to behavioral health to be a sitter. I was a little creeped out. I remember thinking about what we would even do if the power went out and stuff, which actually did happen later, but I wasn't there. No one escaped, but all the doors were auto-unlocked. I get to work upon receiving a report on the patient. The daytime tech tells me this. I honestly don't know why he needs a sitter. He's so nice and polite. He calls me ma'am and held the door for me and stuff. He did sort of get in a fight with another patient, so that's why he has to have a sitter. But the other patient started it, and he isn't even here anymore. You're gonna have an easy night, girl. So I sit next to the guy and try to relax. I honestly wasn't that worried about being in the men's area because generally the women's ward was much more known for causing trouble and violent outbursts and stuff like that. Also, in Missouri, most patients are just bipolar or schizophrenic and off their meds or drug addicts, and people who omit themselves because they can afford the help they need. And the guy really was super nice. He was totally polite and asked about my tattoos and enthusiastically showed me the bear he had tattooed to his arm and stuff like that. As time passed, the night continued to be relatively uneventful, and as bedtime around 9 p.m. came, the guy got in bed and went to sleep. In his room, I situated myself on the floor in the corner near an outlet so I could read my Kindle with my back against the wall. Keep in mind here that while I had worked at the hospital for a while, I had only worked in behavioral health one other time and never really got the specific kind of training that the psych techs get, like how you're always supposed to walk behind everyone so your back is to no one and such safety measures along those lines. We did have alarm buttons that clipped onto our scrubs, but they were apparently pretty flimsy because when I took lunch at 3 a.m., I noticed mine on the floor, slightly under the patient's bed. The guy slept fairly well until around 1 a.m. Around that time, he started to wake up and just sat in his bed, staring at me. I didn't want to appear nervous, and I wasn't really allowed to leave his room anyway, so I would just say hi, tell him the time, and suggest that he still had some time to sleep before breakfast. He had such a weird blank expression on his face, and he would stare and then ask if he could call his parents because he had some things he needed to discuss with them. I would just reiterate the time and tell him he could call them in the morning. Around 3 a.m., I took my lunch with the nurse who was assigned to my patient. While we were eating, she told me she couldn't believe I was brave enough to sit in his room, all things considered. I asked him what she was talking about and said he only needed a sitter for fighting the other dude, and I wasn't really worried. That's when the nurse proceeded to tell me that the man was admitted because he kept threatening to murder his parents, that incidents kept escalating from him making telephone call threats to bringing a gun to dinner with them until finally they brought him in when he started leaving corpses of violently slaughtered animals on his parents' doorstep. She told me that when they went into his trailer, there were a bunch of gutted and dead animals in his home, and there was blood and feces smeared all over the walls. So I don't know if the daytime girl didn't know all that, but I definitely had myself cornered in this guy's room. By the way, I'm 5'4", and I was in the spot literally furthest from the door, with an alarm button that had fallen off, with the guy showing so many serial killer symptoms. And I was only told he needed extra care because another patient had started a fight with him. This is my first post here, and I'm still extremely shaken up from this encounter, so please be kind. I'm not sure if this story is creepy enough for this sub. If not, please let me know, and I'll be happy to remove it. I'm currently a patient at a hospital to receive antibiotics for a cystic fibrosis exacerbation. I'm 17, female, and a freshman in college. My mobility assistance service dog and 70-pound black male golden doodle is staying with me. Before I go to bed each night, around midnight or 12:30, I take him outside to use the bathroom and sniff around a bit. The area that I take him to is off the side of the hospital, with a small patch of grass and a tobacco-free seating area. It is mildly lit, but typically empty. You have to walk down a ramp and across the side of the hospital to reach it. I am on 24/7 medicine and fluids, so I'm always attached to an IV pole. When I leave the floor, I'm required to wear a bright green pass that has my room number on it. Tuesday night, my friend was with me as I gave Hamilton, my service dog, his little bathroom/sniff break. A man in a bomber jacket and blue jeans was sitting in the area, smoking. He seemed to be watching us intently, but I was with both my large dog and my friend, so I wasn't too concerned. Wednesday night, I went out earlier than usual and didn't see him. Last night, however, he was there again. As soon as I arrived to the area, he made a phone call in a hushed tone. Minutes later, another man showed up. They sat together and were both watching me intently for a few moments, until a young woman walked through the area. I was getting relatively nervous, so I used that as my chance to leave. Both men stood up as I started to leave and followed me up the ramp. At the top of the ramp, a security car was parked nearby, and a couple of security guards were standing there talking. I am assuming the men either turned around or went into the parking garage at that point, because I didn't see them enter the hospital, and the only other exit off the ramp is the parking garage. Tonight, I went outside again, later than usual. The man wasn't at the bottom of the ramp in the area that I go to, so I thought I was in the clear. I let Hamilton have his bathroom and sniff break before walking back up the ramp. As soon as I stepped off, I hear somebody 15 feet behind me. It was the same man in the bomber jacket coming from the parking garage. He was carrying something small and narrow. I believe it could have been a knife. No one was in the vicinity, so I sped up. Every time I looked back, he immediately made eye contact. If I sped up, so did he. At one point, my IV pole got stuck on a part of the sidewalk, so I had to stop and lift it. The man picked up his pace, almost jogging now. My dog heard this and turned around. I'm sure Hamilton knew I didn't want that guy anywhere near me. He didn't growl, bark, or anything. Service dogs cannot act aggressive, but stood there and stared intensely at the man while I lifted my IV pole. The man ducked behind a pillar for 10 seconds as I told my dog to leave it, and we made our way as quickly as we could to the hospital doors. However, I didn't want the man to follow me to my room, so I stopped right outside the doors to the actual hospital. From where I was standing, I was directly in the path of the information desk in a well-lit area. I figured this would be my best shot. The man stopped behind me and waited for about a minute. The girl working at the information desk looked up at us, and the man turned around and walked into the hospital. He walked past me, maintaining eye contact through the glass as he passed, turning his head to do so. I finally entered the hospital, and he was walking very slowly down the hallway, constantly turning back to look at me and stopping every few steps. Luckily, the lobby was relatively busy, and the unit that I'm on is locked. I was able to get into the elevator and shut the door before he could get into the elevator unit with me. I spoke to my nurse and will change the time and location that I go outside. However, he may know my room number because I'm required to wear the pass as mentioned before, and I am very nervous that he will somehow sneak into my unit. Hello everyone, long-time lurker and first-time poster here. The other day, I was reading some of your stories to my boyfriend and commenting how lucky I was that I hadn't experienced anything like it. And he reminded me of that. Oh wait, yes, I have. And it's super creepy. A little backstory. A few years ago, I got my tonsils removed, and I should mention that I am well into my 30s. I thought it would be a fairly simple recovery, given that every time I'd ever heard about something getting their tonsils out, that someone was a child. Blending what I heard from my television, my friends, and the internet, it seemed like it would be a breeze. I just live on ice cream and mashed potatoes, lots of Netflix, and sleep. Spoiler alert, it was not a breeze. I found myself in the emergency room at 3 in the morning, 7 days after my surgery, with blood in my throat and the worst pain I could ever imagine. It was a really bad night, made just a little bit worse with the fact that I was alone. I was being really tough about it though. After I'd been admitted to a room, I tried to make myself comfortable and turn on the TV. The room was fairly large for an ER room. I searched through the channels and found something I wanted to watch, probably HGTV to be honest, and decided to text my boss to let him know I probably wouldn't be in the next day. I dug for my phone in my purse, found it, and when I looked up, I realized there was a man in my room. I knew immediately that this man was not in his right mind. He was youngish looking, wearing a dirty t-shirt and khaki shorts, and stared at me, unblinking. "Hi, can I help you?" I asked. The man continued staring at me and said nothing. "I don't think you're supposed to be here," I said, trying to be polite. He said nothing, but began advancing towards my bed slowly. My heart was racing. I was thinking, leave it to me to be murdered in the emergency room. I don't remember what I said next, only it was some version of, "You're not supposed to be here, please leave," but he kept advancing. He was steps away from my bed when 3 cops rushed into my room. The 3 of them put their hands in front of them defensively, but used very polite and soothing tones. They said things like, "Wrong room, buddy," and "Let's go this way," but they never touched him. Somehow, they were able to coax him out of the door and down the hall, closing the door behind them. It was surreal. I almost could have thought I imagined the whole thing, except a few minutes later, the doctor came in to see me and immediately addressed and apologized for my surprise visitor. "Yeah, we have off his meds situation," he said, as though that explained everything. Being in a hospital is truly where we are most vulnerable, and I hadn't until then realized how completely mashed together and exposed we can be. Nothing happened, but it totally could have in those minutes we were alone together. Anyway, I live to see another day, but guy in the hospital, yeah, let's not meet again. So this happened about a year ago, and to this day, I still remember it clear as day. So the night had just began, and my friends and I were all sitting around at my parents' house, kicking back by the fire, having a few beers, and just chilling. Well, the next thing you know, I see flashing lights and a sheriff walking up with some EMTs. A little background for the rest of the story. My mom's had multiple suicide attempts since her teens. The worst that had happened was when my mom overdosed. Thankfully, she made it and is doing better than ever now. So my buddy Sam offers me to drive my sister and I to the hospital. This is where things start to take a turn for the weird. So we get to the hospital, and Sam, my sister, and I have been waiting there for over 3 hours, and we haven't ate at all. So I offer to buy everyone some food. So Sam and I head out to McDonald's to go get some food. Well on our way out to the parking lot, this black guy comes out of nowhere and says his car won't start. So we offer to jump him, and he declines. This is when our warning sign should have started going off. He says he works for the hospital, and then changes it around and says he works for the hospital I work at, and saying we're merging. Now I knew he was full of crap. My hospital was the top in the state, and something was off. I thought maybe he's just having a bad day, like I was, so Sam and I decided to talk to him for a bit. He then proceeds to ask if we could drop him off at his cousin's as it is right next to McDonald's. So we said sure, no problem. We should have known better. So I hop in shotgun and Sam hops in the driver's seat, and our guest proceeds to ask both of us if we could give him about $80. This was the first thing that really set my alarm bells off. We both made up excuses that we're both broke and that we'd still drop him off at his cousin's, no problem. Well, then he changes the destination to his friend's house. This really set me on edge, and Sam shot me a text saying he was freaked out. Sam never freaks out, and usually has a weapon of some sort in his car, thank God. So I started thinking of how the hell I can get this guy out of my car without possibly setting him off. I remember the giant hunting knife Sam always has in his car. I always used to think about it. I thought it was ridiculous. So I asked Sam pretty bluntly, "Is your big ass hunting knife still in your glove box?" Now the moment I mentioned the knife and took it out of the glove box, our guest decides he wants to go to his apartment that is conveniently 2 minutes away. So Sam and I drop our guest off, and thank God he ran off. It still scares me to think about what he had planned for both of us if I hadn't mentioned the knife and brought it out. So hospital parking lot stranger, let's not meet again. I'm a female in my mid-20s and work at a local hospital. This happened last week when I finished my shift in the evening around 8 p.m. It was still light outside and I decided to walk the 20 minutes home. Whenever I'm walking, I tend to listen to music on my iPod or just zoom out. I know, not the safest idea, but most of us do it. A few minutes into the walk, I have to cross a bridge over the motorway. As you walk out the slope to get to the bridge, there's a small wooded area on either side of you. I could feel something or someone around me, so I casually stopped my music and had a look around me. Nothing was out of place, and I thought maybe it was me being overly sensitive. I kept the music off, just in case, and carried on walking. A few seconds later, I heard rustling behind me, and turned around, startled, again. Nothing was there. At this point, my heart is racing, but I'm trying to convince myself I'm being paranoid. I get to the top of the bridge, and am now in the open and can see all around, so I am feeling a lot better. 10 minutes later, and I'm nearing home, and I'm laughing to myself about how silly and paranoid I was. At this point, I'm as relaxed as can be, and my music is back on, and I'm just enjoying winding down from work. I've now reached the top of the park which sits opposite to my road, and am all perked up as I'm nearly home. I look behind me. I hadn't heard anything or really sensed anything to my knowledge, but I'm thankful I did look and saw a guy about 3 feet behind me. He was that close. This guy was tall, skinny, and had greasy black hair that hung around his face. He was dressed in all black. The creepiest part was, he looked dead behind his eyes. He was staring directly at me, and there was nothing there, just blankness. I turned back around and started walking quicker down the park, hoping that I was just being silly. I contemplated rummaging in my bag for my phone to call the police, but I didn't want to slow myself down, and still at this point wondered if I was misreading the situation. The creeper carried on following me, and although wasn't as close as 3 feet anymore, it still significantly kept up speed. Every time I looked behind me, he was staring directly at me, still no emotion. Still completely dead behind the eyes. I contemplated heading somewhere else and trying to lose him, but at this point, I was terrified and just wanted to get to the safety of my own house. As my house came into view, I decided just to run for it, which I shouldn't have done sooner. As I looked behind me, I noticed the creeper wasn't running after me, but he was still walking fast and staring at me. I got to my door and rummaged through my bag for my keys, completely aware that any moment now the creeper could have caught up. I grabbed them and hurried into my house. When he was 15 feet away, I slammed and locked the door behind me and then ran up the stairs. The front door glass panels and our living room area has big glass doors facing the back garden. I didn't want him to be able to see me. I was shaking like crazy as I edged up the stairs and looked out of our stairs window. He was nowhere to be seen. I went upstairs and looked out of the bedroom window and got a better view of the front garden. I couldn't see him. Thought he left. With my heart still racing, I got my phone out of my bag and headed downstairs to call the non-emergency number. As I walked into my living room, his face is pressed up against the glass, peering into my house, and we made eye contact. Dead eyes again. I let out a quiet scream and ran back upstairs. I called the emergency number as I waited for the police. The creeper had taken a seat in my garden, cross-legged, just staring at my house. The police came within 10 minutes and picked him up. He went to them without any struggle. The policewoman that came told me he told them I was waiting for her. Turns out the creeper is a patient in the psychiatric ward of my hospital I work at. From what I found out, since he'd had a bit of a fascination with me from seeing me around the hospital doing my job, some people I know in the psychiatry unit tell me he'd been mentioning me as his girlfriend recently, and they all thought it was another patient. They now think he was talking about me. He's moved on to another hospital now, somewhere where he can recover, and I won't be afraid to go to work anymore. And I'm hoping he doesn't have the freedom to just leave whenever he wants, especially if he's planning on creeping on hospital staff. I do hope he gets better, but I'm finding it hard to have warm wishes for him when he terrified me as much as he did. I'll definitely be catching the bus from now on. Hey guys, it's me. I just wanted to mention right before the video ended, I hope you like my new mic I got. I don't know if it sounds better or worse than the last one I had. Can you guys please tell me? Also, I have a subreddit now where you can upload your stories. And the more stories I get, the more frequent uploads I can upload. So yeah, if you have the time, please give me one of your stories and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.